Welcome back to Badasses of History. I apologize for the 2-week delay. I've had some things that I've been taking care of, and also I'm starting to run out of material. So, if you guys have any suggestions on what I should do next, then please email them to me at badassesspodcast@gmail.com. If you don't have any suggestions, then ask somebody who maybe does. Enjoy! In the year 1917, a badass was born. His name was Yakov Pavlov, and in typical American fashion, I will now call him Patrick. Patrick was a good old boy, raised in northwest Russia. He joined up with the Red Army in 1938, and it would be at the Battle of Stalingrad that he would become a household name. Now, the Battle of Stalingrad had many heroes on both sides of the fight because it was such a massive ordeal. This is the single most devastating battle in world history. The fight between the Russians and the Germans lasted just 5 months, and during that time frame, nearly 2 million soldiers lost their lives. To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire population of Detroit and San Francisco put together. It was a bloody, bloody mess. So in the late summer of 1942, Sergeant Pavlov and 4 others stormed an apartment building and quickly turned it into a fortress. This became known as Pavlov's house. The structure was situated smack dab in the middle of the war. All 3 sides had a nice long line of sight that could be used as sniper nests or heavy machine gun fire. The backside was up against their own friendly lines, so basically the Germans would have to get through this building to advance. This spot was so good that others took notice, and eventually more men filled in the structure. They set up landmines, barbed wire, bunkers, sandbags, and machine gun nests. Patrick and some 20 to 30 men were now ready for the entire German army, and that's exactly what they got. When the Germans realized the importance of Pavlov's house, they decided they needed to overtake it. Patrick himself is personally credited with taking out over a dozen German tanks at this time. He sat on the roof with an anti-tank rifle and shot through the roofs of the tanks as they came in. Wave after wave of enemy soldiers stormed the building, and each and every time, Patrick and his men put them down. It is estimated anywhere from a few dozen to over 100 assaults were launched on Pavlov's house. One soldier said that every other night they had to climb out of the basement to push the wall of German bodies out of the way because they didn't have a line of sight. They were under constant attack. The Germans were ordered to continue firing and bombing the building even during the night so that the Red Army couldn't sleep. That didn't quite work. Just like anything, you get used to it after a while, and the men would go to the basement, cuddle up with some old insulation, and fall asleep. There were a few families in the basement as well. See, Stalin was such a douchebag that he ordered every citizen in Stalingrad to stay. They weren't allowed to leave. He thought this would make the soldiers fight harder if they knew that their own people were still cowering in their homes and dying in the streets. And as messed up as it may be, it did kind of work. The Soviets fought relentlessly and rarely took a step back. They were technically losing the battle, but once they got to Pavlov's house, they stood their ground and didn't budge. Recovered much later, German maps had this location labeled as a fortress, and estimated hundreds of Soviet soldiers were defending it, not realizing there was only a couple dozen. On December 25th, after 2 months of relentless assault, the Soviets pushed forward and advanced their lines. Pavlov's house was no longer necessary to hold, so they moved out. In all, an estimated 1,000 to 2,000 Germans died attempting to overtake Patrick in his house of death. When he returned home, he and some of his men were awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal, which is the equivalent to our Medal of Honor. Pavlov's house still stands to this day, surprisingly intact, and is considered a national monument. All in all, during the 5-month battle in Stalingrad, the Soviets lost around 1.1 million soldiers, and the Germans lost an estimated 800,000. That's 400,000 dead every month, 100,000 per week, 14,000 every day, 600 every hour, and that's 10 dead soldiers every single minute. Like 60 people would have already died while you listen to this. Anyway, the Soviets ended up winning the battle, and the Germans surrendered. But with numbers like that, can you really call yourself a winner? All right, guys, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, then please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, tell your friends. Thanks.